We're going to do the dinosaur logic game from LSAT 57, maybe the hardest game of all time, but I'm going to show you that with the right method, it could actually be pretty simple. So we have 7 dinosaurs, I, L. As usual, we're going to start off by writing the first letter of each of the elements at the top of the page for reference. We have these 7 dinosaurs. Then it says each of them are completely colored either green, mauve, red, or yellow. And then it says a display is to consist entirely of 5 out of 7 of these dinosaur toys. So because we're picking some of them for the display and we're not picking others for the display, that's the key of the game. Whenever you're selecting some of your elements and you're not selecting others, that's always a grouping game. And specifically, it's an in and out grouping game or a selection grouping game, whatever you want to call it. But you have an in group and an out group. And so I'm going to show that I'm going to have 2 groups. You can show it however you want. I'm going to use a check mark and an X. And there's going to be 5 in the in group and there's going to be 2 in the out group. And all that talk about the colors, the green, mauve, red, and yellow, that's just going to be a secondary element. And I'm going to use, as always with secondary elements, I'm going to use lowercase letters so that we don't get confused. We don't mix anything up. And so all we need to know is that of these 7 dinosaurs, 5 of them are going in the in group and 2 are going in the out group. And of the 5 that are going to be on the display, each of them gets a lowercase letter to indicate what color it is. So far, not too bad. Let's take a look at the rules. Rule number 1 tells us that in the in group, in the display, there are going to be 2 mauve toys. And so therefore, underneath the in group, I'm going to write 2 lowercase m. In that group, there are going to be 2 m's. Next tells us that inside the display, included in the display, there's going to be a red stegosaur. So there's going to be a capital S, lowercase r, again, in the in group. Now starts the conditional rules. So rule number 3 says that I is included in the display only if it's green. Now, that's another way of saying that if I is in the display, it better be green, right? Otherwise, it would break this rule. So whenever you have these conditional statements, it's very helpful to convert them into a simple if-then sentence. So you can rephrase this like I just said. If I is in the display, so if I is here underneath the in group, then it is going to be green, right? If this is true, then this is true. If I is in the in group, then IG is in the in group. And same with the next rule, which is telling us that P is included only if it's yellow, which is another way of saying that if P is included, it better be yellow. So far, so good. The only if is a reverse if. So if it says X only if Y, that's another way of saying if X, then Y. Next rule, V is included only if U is not. Same idea. That means that if V is in, then U is definitely out. So if V is in this group, then the arrow always means if then U is in the out group. And finally, if both L and U are included, so if L and U, comma, means and, if L and U are in the in group, then at least one of them is not mauve. So then they can't both be mauve. So not both lowercase m. And that's our entire setup. So we're going to box this off and use this to answer all of the questions. Now you may notice, it's always good to notice the one thing that is the most kind of restrictive area of the game, because that's usually what's going to be controlling the answers to the questions the most. And you may notice that in this case, that's the color mauve. We have a lot of stuff going on with mauve because you always need 2 mauves, but you have some restrictions on who can be mauve and who can't be mauve. I know I say the word mauve a little funny because I'm Canadian. That's how we pronounce that word, so I hope you'll excuse that. But at any rate, you can only have 2 mauves in the in group, and they can't be L and U. They can never be I or P because they always have to be other colors. Same with S, always has to be red. And so therefore, there's not that many colors that are mauve friendly, right? Let's just go through the letters and just make a note here. I can never be mauve because it has to be green if it's in. L could be mauve, P cannot be, S cannot be. So it could be L, T, U, or V, but it can't be L and U at the same time because of this rule. And it can't be U and V at the same time because they can't both be in the in group because of this second last rule. So let's keep an eye on that as we do the questions. So number 12, we'll start with number 12, which is a simple acceptability question, which is usually the first question of any logic game. They just give us 5 layouts and we have to check them all against the rules. So we're going to check it for rule 1, we're going to check all the answer choices for rule 1, and then for rule 2, we'll just do a sweep for each of the rules individually. So rule number 1 says there have to be 2 mauves. So let's check which ones break that rule. But then you would say, wait a second, it doesn't tell us the colors in any of these answer choices. And so there's really no way to immediately know. And so therefore, let's skip that rule and go on to the next one. The next one tells us that the display has to include a red stegosaur. So we don't know, again, what the colors of any of these dinosaurs are because they're not telling us in the question, in the answer choices. But we do know that there at least has to be a stegosaur, and so therefore we can cross off any answer choices that don't have a stegosaur, and if you look through, you'll discover that that is D. D doesn't have a stegosaur, and so therefore D cannot be the answer, because if it doesn't have a stegosaur, then it sure as heck cannot have a red stegosaur. Next rule tells us that if there's an I, it has to be green. And the rule after that tells us that if there's a P, it has to be yellow. But again, there's no way of telling that whether those rules are observed or not just from looking at the page. So we're going to have to skip that for now. The rule after that tells us that if V is in, then U cannot be, which is another way of saying that V and U cannot both be in the in group. That's what would break this rule, is if V and U were both in. And so therefore, which answer choices have V and U both in? If you just glance through, A has both Ultrasaur and Velociraptor, and so therefore A breaks that rule because they're both in the display. And E has both Ultrasaur and Velociraptor, so therefore that breaks that rule. And so we're in a bit of a tricky spot. This is uncommon for these questions, and it threw a lot of people off when they got to this point because they're like, wait a second, B and C, how do I rule one of them out? They both look like they work. And the answer is, well, no, they don't work. They don't both work because this is an LSAT, and so there's only one question. And so it's always good to just take a deep breath and just try one of them out and see which one. There must be a reason why one of these doesn't work. And so let's take a look. Let's just try B because it happens to be the first one. So I'm going to plot out B on my own kind of template here with the check mark and the X. I'm going to see if this works. L, P, S, T, U, which means that the ones that are out are V and I. So let's take a look at the rules. I know that the stegosaur has to be red, so let's take care of that. I know that P, if it's in, has to be yellow. And I know that I need to have, now that we're dealing with all the colors, I know I need to have two mauves. And I have L, T, and U are my possibilities. Now, all three of those letters could be mauve, but it cannot be L and U because of this rule. So let's say we'll make it L and T. And then the U could be whatever. The U could be any color, and that works. And so therefore, B is the answer because we figured out a way to make it work. And so there's no need to even try C. We're going to circle B. If you're curious why C wasn't going to work, it's because there were no two letters in C that could be mauve. If you look at it carefully, you have I, which could never be mauve. You have S and, you have S and P, which could never be mauve. So in C, the only possibilities for mauve dinosaurs are L and U, and that would break this rule if they were both mauve. So there's no way in C to make up the two mauves, and so therefore C could not work, but we tried B anyway. We proved that it was the answer. So let's move on to number 13, moving right along here. Number 13 gives us an if. It says if T is not included in the display. So we're going to start off, as we always do with an if, by making the if true. If T is not in the display, let's look for all the inferences we can if T is not in the display. Now, the thing to keep an eye on in this game is that there's always 5 in and 2 out. And so if you're telling me that T is out, that's already half of the out group, right? And notice that we have a rule that's pushing letters out. The V pushes the U out, which means that the V and the U can never both be in, as we've pointed out previously. And so therefore, if V and U cannot both be in, at least one of them always has to be out. Now, this matters here because we know that this other spot in the out group is going to be taken up by either V or U, because otherwise they would both be in, and that would break this rule. And so therefore, that tells us, well, wait a second, if we have T out and either V or U, which is always the case, that either V or U, at least one of them is going to be out. So wait a second, now we know that the other 5 letters have to be in. And which 5 letters are they? We know it's the other one of V or U, right? And I'm just going down the list from left to right over here. I'm looking, we have I, we have L, we have P, and we have S. So just by telling us that T is out, we can figure everything that's in and everything that's out. And now let's go through the rules and fill a few things in. We know the stegosaur has to be red. We know that because of this rule, the P has to be yellow. And we know the I has to be green. And we know that therefore the 2 remaining letters, in order to observe this first rule about the 2 mauves, have to both be mauve. So L has to be mauve and V or U has to be mauve. But wait a second, if I'm glancing at my rules, I know that L and U cannot both be mauve, and so therefore this better not be a U, because that would mess that rule up. And so therefore this better be a V, and the U better be over here. And that's how you can figure out the entire layout. All they told us was that T is out. And we looked at the inferences and we figured the entire setup out. So now we just have to glance through the answers and see which one is right. The question is asking us, The display must contain, so the in group must contain all of these except, and if you look down the list, these are all in our diagram in the in group except for D, a mauve Ultrasaur, because Ultrasaur, we just pointed out, is over here. And so therefore, D is going to be the answer to number 13. Let's move on to number 14. I'm just going to try to stay neat over here. Number 14. We're looking for a pair of toys that could be in the display together. So there's no if here, so there's nothing to start off by making true. And so therefore, we're just going to skip straight to trying out these answer choices. And because they're asking which of the following could be true, we're going to try to make them true and look for the one that works. And obviously, 4 of them are going to not work. So let's start with A. Could a green Lambeosaur, so that would look, that would look like this, LG, and a mauve Velociraptor, could they both be in the display? So let's see. What would the rest of the display look like? Well, if V is in, we just triggered this rule. I'm just looking at the rules. That would mean U has to be out. Right? I always know that the red Stegosaur has to be in, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Now, I know I need another mauve letter, right? And the mauve could be, what are our 4 mauve-friendly letters? Well, L was already a different color. U is already out. V is already mauve, and so therefore it has to be T. T would have to be the other mauve. And then my 5th dinosaur could really be anything. Let's go ahead and just make it the I, and the I would be G. And that seems like that works, and so therefore that's the right answer. There's no need to even test anything else out. We followed all the rules. If you look through them, you'll see that we observed all of them. Whichever letter we skipped, it looks like it was P would have to be in the out group. The reason the other answer choices didn't work here, and you can look at them and see it pretty quickly, is because they didn't take care of the mauve letters well enough, right? A already gave us one of the 2 mauve letters, but if you try out each of the other ones, you'll see that there's no 2 letters that could be mauve. For example, and you don't have to do this, so this is kind of extra time. I'm just showing you, what would have happened if you tested out B before A. You would have seen a green Lambeosaur and a yellow Tyrannosaur. So what are my 2 mauve letters going to be? If it's not L and T, it would have to be U and V, because those are the only 4 mauve-friendly letters, and U and V can never be in together, right? Same thing with C. If it's not L or U, well, not exactly the same thing, but with C, if it's not L or U, then it would have to be T and V, and so T and V would have to be mauve, but wait a second, they told me that U is in, and U and V can never be in together. So if you try those out, you'll see that they won't work, just because they haven't taken care of the 2 mauve letters. So let's move on to number 15. If the display does include TY, so let's go ahead and put capital T, lowercase y, and now let's see if we can look for inferences here. So if we have the Tyrannosaur and the Tyrannosaur is not mauve, then that means the 2 mauves have to be made up of L, U, and V. Now let's think about that for a second. And as always, whenever they give me an if, I like to look for inferences, because that's always the most efficient way to do this question. So I'm thinking, wait a second, I need to make up 2 mauve letters from these 3. Now how many combinations are there? I know there can't be U, L and U because of this last rule. I know they can't be U and V because of this second last rule. Those 2 letters can't even both be in. And so therefore the 2 mauve letters, by process of elimination, must be L and V, right? When you have 3 letters, there's only 3 different combinations. It's either LU, LV, or UV. But UV doesn't work, and LU doesn't work, though they can't both be mauve, and so therefore L and V must be the 2 mauve letters. And if V is in, that pushes U out. I'm just looking at what other rules I've triggered here. I know that red Stegosaur is always in, so let's go ahead and do that. And my 2 remaining letters are what? I and P. So either I, G, or PY is in, and then the other one of those dinosaurs is out, and that's the entire layout for number 15. So which of the following must be true? We just did the whole question. All we have to do is look through and see which one must be true. So for example, A doesn't have to be true. I could be in or out, as we just showed. The only one of these that must be true is if you glance through them, you'll see that E, we need to have a mauve Velociraptor, and that's right here, and so therefore that is going to be the answer to number 15. Let us move on to number 16. So you can see this game really isn't that bad if you know how to do it quickly. Number 16, if both I and U are included, so if both I and U, and always S, by the way, we always know that S is in, and it's red. So if I is in, then it's always green. Sorry, that's a G. So let's go ahead and look for inferences before we look at the answer choices. We know that V and U cannot both be in the in group, so if U is in, that better mean that V is out. Now, do we know anything else? Do we know what the other two letters are? We know that we need to have a couple of mauve letters, right? And since V is out, the two mauves have to be made up of L, T, and U. We have three choices to choose from as far as what the two mauve letters are going to be. And once again, the two mauve letters, as usual, cannot be L and U. And so therefore, the two mauve letters would have to be either L and T or U and T. But either way, as you can see, T is going to be one of the mauve letters. So I know that was a bit of a tricky inference, but we just determined that, because if T wasn't mauve, right, we just determined that T has to be mauve, because if it wasn't mauve, then the two mauve letters left, the two mauve-friendly letters left, are L and U, and that couldn't work because that would break this rule, and V is already out. So therefore, T must be a mauve letter, and it must be in the display. Which two letters? We've already placed 5 of the capital letters, which leaves us with L and P, right? And so we're going to go either L/P, L/P. Let's take a look at the answer choices, because we just figured out pretty much everything. The answer choices, the question says then the display must contain what? Oh, and look at that. We just figured it out. A mauve tyrannosaur. So A is the answer to number 16. Now, I know that was a tricky answer, tricky inference to spot, and so if you hadn't spotted that, you still would have been able to figure this out by making each of these answer choices false, right? That's how you test out whether something must be true, is to go through them one at a time and see, can I make it false? And the one that you cannot make false, which in this case would have been A, so it wouldn't have taken that long because it would have been the first one that you try, you would have seen that since I can't make it false, therefore it must be true. But as usual, that's only plan B. Plan A is always to look for inferences, and if you spot the inferences from the if that they give you in the question, you make the if true and you look for inferences, a lot of the time, more than half the time, that'll get you the answer as it did here, as long as you find the inferences. So let's go to number 17, last question. I'm going to do it over here. If the display includes 2 green toys. So let's map that out. There's going to be 2 G's. I don't know what they are, but I know they're 2 lowercase g's. Now, there's always 2 M's, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And wait a second, I know that the SR is always in, so I know that's the 5th letter is SR. So that's pretty restrictive. We know what all 5 of the colors are. We know what the whole color layout is. Let's think about what else we can figure out. Based on these rules, what do we know? Well, wait a second. P, if it was in, would have to be yellow, and so therefore P can't be in because there's simply no yellow colors. And so therefore P has to be out. We always know that either V or U is out, as we've pointed out before, because they can't both be in, because that would break this second last rule. And so therefore we know the 4 letters that are in. What are they? They're the other of V and U. I'm going to put them off to the side because I don't know exactly which one gets matched with which lowercase letter. We know it's V/U. We know it's I. I is going to have to go with one of these G's, right? Because I, if it's in, has to be G. We know it's V/U. We know it's L. And what are we missing? We are missing not P, not L, not S, T. So these are the 3 letters that have to get matched up with these 3 lowercase letters. And the 2 mauves can't be L and U, as always. So the 2 mauves have to be either L and V, or V and T, or L and T. So let's take a look at the answer choices, because we figured out a lot of stuff here. So let's see if we can test out the answer choices. Which of the following could be true? Could it be true that there's exactly 1 yellow toy in the display? No, it's impossible. You can see there's no Y's here, so that's not going to work. B, could it be true that the T is included and it's green? Well, let's see. I'm going to test that out here. I'm going to put the T next to the G. And the other letters have to be L, so the 2 mauves would have to be L, and not U, because that would break this last rule, so it'd have to be L and V, and that seems to work, right? Then the U would be the one that's out, and if you look through the rules, we've observed all the rules, and so therefore that is the answer. B here was the answer, and so you can see this game really wasn't that bad. As long as you kept an eye on the rules, the trick is for every question, always keep making sure you're keeping an eye on all the rules and you're not forgetting anything. And if you're constantly looking at the rules, you should always see all the inferences, and you should be able to do this game fairly quickly. So I hope this video is helpful. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And as usual, we'll see you in the next video.